what's on the docket for today? Oh, LTT finally released the Linux Daily Driver Challenge.
As of today, it is finally here.
So Linus Tech Tips released a video this week that was the part 1 of their Linux Daily Driver Challenge.
Where he covered Linux, okay, using it as a daily operating system. For something Linux related, this is big.
All right, I guess. I'll talk about the Linux video.
Let's do a reaction video.
This is your fault.
Let's at least try to take something nice out of it.
First, before we jump into the video, I just have to say my hat is off to him just for trying this out.
And really, no matter how this goes, it's probably going to be a net positive for Linux in general, just because of the positive press.
To celebrate the exciting launch of Windows 11, Luke and I are challenging each other to ditch Windows altogether and replace our Windows PCs with Linux for a month. And if either of us caves, they have to dye their hair in red, green, blue, and yellow quadrants permanently. Easy, you might say.
That's so silly, but okay. All right.
I'd just like to interject for a moment where you're referring to... Of course they did.
Embarrassingly, I have never actually made an earnest attempt to daily drive Linux. And one of the reasons for that is the utterly paralyzing number of choices you have to make before you even get started.
I don't even know, is that Garuda Linux, the Falcon looking one? And what is my Druager?
All these distributions on the screen you're seeing, a lot of them are based off the same thing. Mint, Elementary, Ubuntu, Pop! OS, all those are based on Debian. Garuda Linux, Chimera OS, Manjaro, Drawer, all those are based on Arch Linux. The only really big difference when you have all these, because they're all based kind of on the same thing, is the package manager and how they install programs and the code of paint on top of them. All of these can be customized, and honestly, I could take any of those and make one look exactly like the other and operate like the other, no matter what it is.
The sheer number of choice does make it difficult for somebody trying to pick initially, but once you do kind of experiment and play around with a couple of the options, you kind of get a feel for what you're actually looking for.
I could just call on industry contacts or even use internal resources to...
Yeah, Wendell and Anthony are awesome. I love them.
The point of this challenge is that Luke and I should be using the exact same resources that anyone else would have.
See, what's actually interesting about that is that I actually used Anthony's video as sort of a guide and a step-by-step walkthrough of how to run Linux properly, and that was a massive help.
And with that in mind, right out of the gate, I would forgive the average gamer for making it as far as Google hit #1 for...
These are just terrible options.
I don't expect much from this article.
So if you do Google for like the best Linux anything and you go to a website that like isn't a Linux specific website, you're not really going to get that good of an answer.
I used to troll a lot of the people in the Linux community by doing these because everyone likes to look them up. Hey, what's the best distro? I just kind of did like a terminal install of everything using like Arch and saying this is the best distro.
It is full of jargon that a non-Linux enthusiast couldn't possibly be expected to know.
Tons of desktop environment options, DE, that's what that is. Gaming-focused kernel modifications, you could be forgiven for not knowing what that is. BFQIO scheduler. All of this stuff is like 10 years ago. Like this is stuff that we were dealing with, like that were actual issues for new users 10 years ago. I can see where he's finding this to be really obnoxious and confusing.
How is it that Ubuntu can be simultaneously easy to use and beginner friendly and a hassle to set up?
Fair enough. That is kind of weird. Maybe it's because they're talking about installing proprietary drivers.
Installing your graphics driver could be a pain. It's different from the way that you're used to setting it up on Windows.
Customization gets billed as this major selling point for Linux, and fair enough if that's your thing, but speaking on behalf of normies, I don't want a dozen novel ways to do the same thing. I want one fast, easy one.
Then what you want is actually GNOME.
That seems to be the general philosophy of what GNOME, the GNOME project and the GNOME Foundation is doing.
Much to the chagrin of neck-bearded Linux chads, GNOME tries to minimize the number of customizations and just provide end users with a simple, straightforward way to do things easily.
Let's move on to hit #2 here, this time from Tech Radar. Supports several controllers.
Is it just me, or is the website look of how this website is laid out is exactly as the other one?
Furthermore, the messaging around what makes an individual distro stand out compared to the other ones gets really muddy in some places.
Hundreds of games, fully usable live environment. Fedora Games Spin? What is that? That isn't even a thing. That's a thing? And then reasons to avoid open source titles.
In spite of its spectacularly stupid name, pop!_OS topped
Good choice.
just about every listicle that I found and legitimately has some compelling selling points, like demystifying the notoriously difficult process of getting my NVIDIA GPU working properly.
Okay, so NVIDIA GPUs, I totally agree. If you have an NVIDIA GPU, you can go with Pop! OS, and it's a really good experience because it just works out of the box. I would say if you really want a daily drive, I really just say get an AMD graphics card.
If you're using Linux, AMD is the better solution.
It's gonna just be so much less of a headache because you won't have to ever deal with drivers again.
I, on the other hand, after a lot of deliberation, decided to go with the daring, the uncompromising Linux Mint.
Solid. Good choice.
So I'm not scared of figuring out how to install a GPU driver or use a package manager. I'm comfortable getting my hands dirty with Grub, but that doesn't mean I'm not a little scared of you. I'm pretty technical and I work in development every day, but hardcore Linux chads are absolutely terrifying. You scare me, and I really want this to go well because I still want you to like me when this is all over.
One thing you should learn about the Linux community, you're gonna piss somebody off anywhere you step. There's no winning this challenge, by the way, in the Linux community's eyes. They're gonna get roasted no matter how well or bad this goes.
Please don't be mean to Luke. Luke is lovely.
So this is what happened last time. My desktop,
Oh.
you can see where it's supposed to sort of end, but
Oh, I've
there's
seen
the
that.
menu.
I've
If I had
definitely
mouse
seen
over
that
these, I
happen.
can't-
I've run into this exact same problem.
I've seen that happen in GNOME, multiple monitors. It'll spawn on the wrong monitor, but
But the interaction will be on the other monitor.
I don't know what that's about. There's still some weird quirks, especially with dual screens on Linux.
I knew audio was going to be a challenge because I don't.
Oh no, he's got a Go XLR.
Oh, Go XLR. Okay, so Go XLR is a cool piece of hardware.
You can't put it through Wine or anything like that. It's just not gonna work, period.
It's just a cool idea, but last I checked, they have almost zero support for Linux.
He needs to not use that. That's gonna be such a headache. Go XLR though is no slouch. That's like a $400 or $500 piece of equipment. This is a Soundcraft UI16, about $600. It would be a good alternative to what Linus is doing if he didn't already have the Go XLR. The Go XLR is just not gonna work for him. Poor guy.
Of course, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on any of this for now, because the goal today for part 1 is to pick a distro, get it installed, and run a game. I will definitely need Steam. Failed to install Steam.
Oh,
Wait a second.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
you're trying to remove the following essential packages.
Pop desktop, pop session, GNOME control.
Pop desktop, pop session, GNOME control center.
Pop desktop, pop session, GNOME control center.
Okay, yeah, that'll break the system.
That's his entire desktop.
What? Why?
Wait a second, did that say Xorg?
Xorg that's used to render graphics on your display.
This is absolutely a bug.
Oh no, there's some kind of bug in Pop! OS here.
What's basically going on here is some dependency error between programs and packages.
He probably has to do like an update or something.
Can't uninstall it. Surely Pop Shop won't allow him.
This is stupid, apparently.
Okay, so we're doing a sudo apt-get install Steam.
And I have to type, yes, do as I say in order to...
Oh, no.
No, don't do that.
Don't do it. Don't say that.
No.
Oh.
Install and launch now. What is the point of having a... Oh.
Oh, yep, that's to be expected.
Oh, no,
Computer
dude.
just hard reset?
No, it did not.
My computer just hard reset?
No, you uninstalled everything.
I think you just uninstalled your Xorg, man.
Linus uninstalled his entire desktop environment.
So if it ever says, yes, do as I say, if that's what you have to type in,
Stop.
then that means you're about to do something really bad.
There is a little bit of blame for Linus not reading this part.
Warning, the following essential packages will be removed. This should not be done unless you know exactly what you are doing.
And you should be forgiven for skipping over all of that jargon that just pops up when you type in a command. You type in sudo apt install and then it vomits a bunch of crap on your screen.
Maybe they should color code this in the terminal to be like full on red.
Flashing red, which is something that you can do in the terminal. Hey, you're about to delete your entire frickin' desktop environment.
If it's highlighted, I'm sure Linus actually would have read it then.
When it comes to user interfaces, the easier it is, the better. If Granny is trying to install software and she messes it up because the user interface wasn't clear with her, that's the UI fault, okay? That's the OS fault.
I feel for you, Linus. It's such a bad user experience, dude.
So a cool thing about Linux is that you can recover from this kind of situation.
What's happening is it's trying to go to something and there's no desktop there.
It seems like a massive problem, and it is. You're essentially breaking the system by removing Xorg, but you can easily replace it or fix it just by reinstalling the things that were removed.
If you hold Control and then Alt, like F2, F3, it puts it into a console TTY, which is what you'd use in more of the server realm to troubleshoot, or you could actually reinstall the desktop from there, or NVIDIA drivers if you accidentally flushed your NVIDIA drivers and you got a black screen.
And another cool thing about Linux is that you can do pretty much whatever you want, even if you shouldn't. And this is an example of that kind of power.
Okay, so we've got the Novu, or
This is looking a little bit better on this side of the project.
Pressing the reset button on my computer did not, in fact, allow it to come back to life. Let's try an all the way off and start again. Not that I...
That's not gonna help.
Man, if I manage to completely brick this install in 15 minutes, that might be a new personal best for me.
I like how it's Linus too. Like, it had to be the biggest public showcase of Linux to the widest possible audience of tech users, and it had to fuck up in this one specific way during this one specific moment.
Did I manage to completely nuke my desktop environment, like my GUI?
Yeah, you did, man. It's gone.
That's a really unfortunate for System 76 and the Pop! OS project.
So I've got Manjaro loaded up here.
Here we go.
And we're gonna take another
Arch, by the way, let's go.
So he did go with Manjaro. Okay, all right.
Now, we can have a back and forth about whether something Arch-based is a good first distro. I am going to be squarely in the camp that it is not.
To be clear, it's entirely possible that I did something completely wrong, not knowing what I was doing, and I'm responsible for the OS getting bricked. I just also think that with you guys along for the ride, the things that I did were not entirely ridiculous or unreasonable.
No.
You can be mad at me for breaking.
That was a bug on Pop!
At
OS's
least
part.
acknowledge. Why are the two columns open source and installed?
I was talking about this. Why is there checkboxes for open source that you can't modify, and then installed is also a checkbox that you can modify?
That makes absolutely no sense.
Okay, so we gotta restart Steam real quick. Well, I believe FTL has a native Linux version. I'm just gonna install directly, and we're gaming on Linux, boys.
Oh wait, my sound still isn't working. Yeah, I still have no sound. Honestly, I'm kind of willing to live with that. Let's just... It's on the right.
What the fuck,
And
man?
no dice. And we're gaming.
There you go.
It's running nice and smooth. This is
Does he
a
have sound
native
yet?
game, so this is really not that much of a challenge. My sound still isn't working.
No
Still
sound
have-
yet.
Discord looks like there's a way to get it going. It involves a lot of command line. Hopefully I won't brick my OS.
What?
Discord is really easy to install. You can just use the Flatpak or the Snap, and that's it. You're done. And I think there's actually RPMs and debs too.
By the way, if you've made it this far to the very end of the video, I did in fact figure out what happened with Pop! OS. For whatever reason, apt-get install Steam did a whole bunch of other stuff.
The reason why this has happened is because that System 76 unfortunately left a catastrophic dependency bug in the version of Pop! OS that they've launched with. It's been fixed.
The issue I had with Pop! OS has been fixed for some time now. After the fix, a broken package should never be able to uninstall the desktop unless you specifically work around it. To be clear, you did work around it.
What he did was he actually went into the terminal like we're seeing over here.
The pop shop wasn't allow you to do it.
Also, we just needed to update the system before installing Steam.
Linus did not update his system, and that's not an intuitive thing. Maybe if there was a pop-up that was like, hey, before you install anything, you really should do a fresh update for the latest packages and everything.
I think that it's really interesting that we saw both sides too, where Linus was having all these issues and Luke wasn't.
Luke was just flying through it, just breezing through the whole thing, just got his fucking shit set up and then just installed FTL and got it running. And then Linus destroyed his DE, reinstalled installed to a different distro entirely, couldn't get his sound working, and then his game looked like that.
I think Linus is going to run into a lot more problems because he's obviously using a lot of proprietary stuff, some stuff that's just not designed for Linux.
Death to Microsoft! The open source community is ready to send you to your grave! Your tyrannical reign over PC gamers is at an end! Freedom!
Is what I would say if I lived with Linus Wallace III over here in Fantasyland where any of that was true. So far, the 1 month Linux Gaming Challenge has been as advertised, a challenge. And in part 2, Luke and I are going to be taking it to the next level by not just gaming on Linux, but by recording and streaming our gameplay to viewers on Twitch.
So in this video, the challenge is to record and stream gameplay to Twitch.
So comms is easy because you have Discord and things like that, and capturing the game and the audio, OBS will handle all of that, so should be simple.
We both use Elgato key lights, which we've always controlled using Windows software, so we'll both need to find a workaround for that.
Yeah, that's not going to be an easy task.
I tried to apt-get OBS, the industry standard for desktop capture and streaming, in the terminal, only to discover that Manjaro, the Linux distribution that I'm using, doesn't come with apt because
I can totally get why any new Linux user would make this mistake, especially if they're jumping between different distros.
This is kind of weird.
In the last video they did,
I remember the very big point that Linus was making in the previous video.
he was complaining about having to go into the terminal to install stuff.
Why are you using the terminal?
But now his first instinct is to go into the terminal and install stuff.
Use Discover, please. Please use Discover.
Okay, so if we type in OBS, it should be right there. It's in the official repo.
So we just go to OBS. Here you go. See Linux. So you're using Manjaro. Boom. Copy paste. Done.
the message that comes up when you try to execute the command doesn't say, hey, you should probably be using Pac-Man, you dunce. It tries to install some kind of dependency for apt, then just quietly fails and prompts you to do the same thing again when you try to use it.
Wait, what? Let's see what he's talking about here. Okay, sudo apt install, or I guess he's doing apt get install, OBS studio. Let's see what error he gets. I'm just gonna run this command. Apt get not found. What are you talking about? I'm not sure what error he's having.
I had a panic moment when I checked OBS compatibility and found out that it is actually unsupported in Arch, by the way,
That
and its derivatives.
is not what it said.
Well, yes, it is unsupported, but that's just not necessarily implying that it's not going to work well. It implies that they are not specifically guaranteeing support.
So if something goes wrong, don't contact the developers about there being a problem on Arch Linux. It is unofficially supported by the community.
But the good news is that upon launch, I was immediately relieved to find that it works exactly as expected, with
Crazy.
some exceptions. For example, the NVENC new encoder doesn't show up as an option, which
That's weird.
Wait, what?
The NVENC encoder works fine for a lot of people.
I have NVENC encoding.
It also comes by default, I think, in the Snap version of OBS.
I don't know. I have it right out of the box.
Also, this Reddit thread was 2 years ago. Someone saying a statement about it not being available on Linux might have been true then. I don't think it was even then, but it definitely isn't true now.
I always kind of assumed that the Linux community was grousing about NVIDIA primarily for their locked down proprietary approach to things.
No.
The Linux software has never gotten the kind of TLC from the UX team that the Windows software does.
Of course, yeah. I mean, NVIDIA has been, notoriously terrible to work with, according to some people who are also named Linus.
NVIDIA has been the single worst company we've ever dealt with. So NVIDIA, fuck you.
If your peripherals have a manufacturer-provided tool that is used to reconfigure RGB lighting, or the lift-off distance of your mouse, or the sensitivity steps of your DPI button,
You're gonna be on
then
what?
get ready to install Windows in a virtual machine, pass those devices through, configure them, and then hand them back over to Linux.
You can do that, yes, but you can also just install stuff with Wine. You can actually run some applications through Proton and get functionality properly. It's also not really fair to Linux to attack it for not having support for a specific esoteric product software. The software made by these people that are almost always guaranteed to be proprietary, and when they do that, it's not possible for us to port it ourselves, so they have to support it. And if they don't support it, then yeah, you gotta jump through hoops. hoops. But that's true if there is not support on something with Mac. You either jump through hoops or deal without. This is the problem that I see with these kinds of challenges. People expecting this hardware that was not designed for Linux to work and being disappointed when it doesn't.
But wait, there's a solution. All I have to do is follow these simple instructions to download a random script off GitHub and run it with...
Yeah, okay. Downloading a random script off GitHub is always a good idea.
Depending on your skill level, that's fine because you can read the script. Since it's on GitHub, it's open source and you could see what it's doing. But if you're just an average user, that is not a solution necessarily, and also a potentially dangerous one depending on what you're downloading.
With no indication given whatsoever for how exactly to run a script.
It's like a veteran Linux user trying to say that like, oh yeah, it's really easy for any user to do this.
All you have to do is modify this one file.
You just go into the terminal and type chmod fucking blah, 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 you know, you type some fucking runic scripts in the terminal and it just works.
Listen, we know this because we've used this for years.
Because he already knows how to do it.
I know I can work my way around a terminal.
It's hard for me to judge that kind of stuff now just because I've already done it for so long.
Most average people shouldn't need to bring up a terminal. They shouldn't need to open up a GitHub. They shouldn't need to compile software in order to use their operating system in the most basic of manners.
This is one of those annoyances you're going to come across if you're approaching Linux from a less developer perspective, I guess.
And I know GitHub is for developers and not for end users, but it's really hard to hide behind that shield when it took me less than 2 days to run into a situation where I had to use it. I mean, at that point, if GitHub is only for developers, then desktop Linux is only for developers.
It's not only for developers. Not everybody has the hardware that you want to use. So for those who don't have a GoXLR, then they have something else. They wouldn't have the same experience that you did.
So it turns out that right-click Save Target As gets you an HTML file in .sh clothing because, I don't know, some borderline arbitrary reason probably.
Well, because it's a link to a page that represents the file that's part of the GitHub repo.
I'm sorry, but this is not a borderline arbitrary reason.
In order to get it to be an actual .sh file, I had to copy it into a text editor, Kate, and then save that as a script and execute it in the terminal.
No.
If you click raw here, this will take you to the actual raw contents. So if you were to like right click on this and hit save link as, this would actually download the PHP file.
There's a download zip button.
Click code, click download zip.
You can also click code and hit download.
This is basically not knowing how GitHub works.
And it has nothing to do with Linux. Linux doesn't run GitHub. Actually, it's Microsoft, so you should be blaming Microsoft there.
Once Linus had a script file and then double clicked it to launch it, it asked to open or execute or cancel.
The most notable issue I had was that my audio devices were just kind of screwy in OBS. My voice came across very unnaturally deep, and it sounded like my mic input had been duplicated.
My voice just feels deep right now. I don't know if I've got something lodged or what.
That's not an OBS problem. That's a problem with Pulse Audio.
It sounds more like a Pulse Audio issue.
Pulse Audio is notoriously weird when it comes to devices.
The sample rate being modified depending on the applications launching in the order they do.
That's what's happening. Your sample rate is being swapped for some reason. Usually it's because two different applications are trying to use the same sample rate at once. And so Pulse Audio is like, oh, I got you covered, bro. And it'll switch you over to a different sample rate, which is like insane. Like, why would that be the way that it works?
But the easiest thing to do is just to close the OBS and restart it, and that'll fix the problem.
I just restarted OBS, and yeah, that solved pretty much everything.
There you go.
Which was kind of frustrating because I've heard time and time again that you don't have to turn things off and on again to get them working in Linux.
Yes, you can reload your kernel, your net system, your graphics drivers, your audio server, every piece of software on your system. You absolutely can do it.
Look at that, bam, hit yes. It's basically updating the whole system in the background, minimize, call it a day.
In a production system that you don't want to go offline, it's perfectly good to try to do that. But for a home user, 99% of the time, it's just quicker to do a restart.
Once I got PAMAC figured out, getting comms going was surprisingly simple. PAMAC is a program with a graphical user interface that functions similarly to the Pacman package manager that you operate in the terminal. At least it does once you find the hidden button in PAMAC to search Snap, Flatpak, and Arch user repository entries.
Wrong, because Pacman does not search those things.
The only really difficult thing was choosing the right package to install for Discord. There's regular Discord, and then there's Canary Discord. whatever that is.
Canary basically means developer beta mode.
It's like nightly, it's like beta.
It's getting access to things before they're ready.
It is the bleeding edge package. You know, canary in the coal mine. If something breaks, you're the first one to die.
I chose the most official looking package, and I was up and running almost immediately once I found the super convenient per application volume mixer in the bottom right corner.
Super convenient, he said it.
The interface is kinda kludgy, but other than that, it works really well, and my first voice call to Luke went completely without a hitch. Unfortunately, I actually still have not figured out how to get desktop notifications working.
Linus, you want to know why your desktop notifications are not working? You're in streamer mode. Streamer mode disables notifications. This happens on Windows as well.
I do have an AVIO 4K capture card, which does work on Linux, but I don't have the micro HDMI cable that it would need to connect to my camera. I could pick one up.
Basically, the cause of Luke's problem here is that he doesn't want to go for a drive down to the store. Like, he could fix this in like 5 minutes.
I'm sure any random viewer wouldn't have been able to tell a difference between one of my old Windows streams and this one. Audio was good, capture was good. That's where the good ends, however. Literally everything I used past this point was a lesser experience compared to its Windows counterpart.
PC gaming already requires a certain amount of tinkering. I mean, there's a reason that more people game on consoles. You know, whether it's trying to track down save files in some Vista era folder or forcing an aspect ratio in an INI file. But a Linux gaming PC, it requires all of that crap and then another mountain of crap on top of it. It is not that easy to use.
I can fully empathize with what they're talking about here. I mean, I experienced basically the same stuff when I was the first Linux user, but when I was first coming on to Linux, it was a much more difficult and exclusive experience, let me tell you. They have the benefit of having something like Lutris, which when I first started using Linux did not exist at all. And Wine was literally like, you had to go to Wine HQ and see if the app had a good rating or not. And if it didn't, then you were not going to get it running. I mean, when I first started using Linux, MP3 support was still like a thing that was frowned upon by the community. Like, you don't need MP3 support. Convert all your MP3s to OGGs. I'm a little envious of them because they're having an easier go of it.
Linus and I, now 3 weeks into daily driving some form of Linux on our personal gaming machines, will change the gears and attempt to complete 12 simple tasks.
In preparation for this part of the challenge, I practiced using Play on Linux by installing Notepad++, and I hope that if I really need some other Windows application, that's going to come in handy for me. If it doesn't, I also have a working Windows 10 virtual machine that I set up using KVM.
This is the guy who didn't know about different package managers on different distros, couldn't work out how to read the error message that it showed up on Pop! OS, but he worked out how to set up KVM. It's just really weird what sections of Linux he actually knows about.
But Luke and I agreed ahead of time that using a VM that's running paid, non-open source software kind of violates the spirit of the challenge here, even if it is technically within bounds.
I think that it's fair enough to say that a VM running Windows would sort of violate the essence of it, I guess.
Some people have said this is like a cheat. This is a little bit of a hack. It's not real gaming Muda underneath Linux if you're using Windows, which to be honest, I'm gonna say fuck you, okay?
I'm a huge proponent of open source. You can use proprietary software if you want to. There are proprietary pieces of software that I use as well on my system for my workflow. So if you have some software that you want to use as proprietary, go ahead and do it. Now, of course, if you can use an open source alternative just as well, then absolutely do that. There are some times where proprietary software, while not ideal, could be the better option.
Here are the challenges you must surmount in whatever order you please. Cut and paste a file from OneDrive. Oh, man, I was expecting them to come up with some stuff that's really challenging. It is done.
Wait, how the hell is it 1 minute and 50 seconds already?
3.9 gigs, playing it back.
I'm going to cut this, and I'm gonna paste this. Done.
This is really annoying. macOS does this too. There's no refresh button in Dolphin. So
is there none? So is there for 13 more actions, what is it? View, refresh. Okay, it was very hidden. Okay, I'll take the criticism.
You can't force it to refresh, and I know what the philosophy is. The philosophy is you're not supposed to need to refresh. Well, sometimes I do! So you need to have the button.
A little bit of an overreaction right there, but I do want to say that it is possible to do it in Dolphin. And as you can see, I got some files in my desktop folder. If you were to do F5, you'll see it does a refresh. By default, you're right, there's no refresh button, but you can add one.
Hey, look at that. I got a refresh button.
So if you go up to the hamburger menu, just right-click the menu and you'll see that there's a configure toolbars button.
Right-click and hit configure toolbars.
You click that.
You can see all of the different things you can put on your toolbar in Dolphin, and there is quite a bit.
Go into here for the filter, refresh, there you go. Now you can add that over, click apply, and you'll see refresh button.
Look at here, it's done. That was easy.
Success.
There we go. Only 9 minutes later.
Challenge 2, digitally sign this PDF. Oh, draw a rectangle to indicate the signature field. Okay. Do. The signature this size is too small to read. No, I'm just gonna sign it. There are no available signing certificates.
I'm assuming I'm not going to be able to sign it because I'm assuming this is just a reader.
What
there
is this
something
challenge?
on here? I know what I use on Windows for this is Sejda. Okay, this is what I use on Windows. Save. Signed. Done.
Blah, 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 blah. What commands? It's clear that this is a thing that you can do, and it's something that I could figure out if I had another half an hour.
Linus is a really smart guy, but I think he like makes things a little more complicated than they need to be.
What Linus did is he went to go and do a cryptographic signature.
Linus was trying to do it the right way by finding cryptographic keys. Luke found the awesome way of just copy-pasting an image onto another image, which...
That's not really digitally signing, but for most instances, for most documents, people don't care about the digital signature.
Literally, when I've done this, I literally just open the PDF in GIMP and then use my draw tablet to write my actual signature on the line. And then I save it back as a PDF and I send it.
Export a chart from VXL. Right click, export as image. Looks like it worked.
Export as image. Yes.
Add a new font. I'm assuming this is just dragging it into the fonts folder.
This isn't actually a fonts folder. It's just to view the fonts you have installed.
So I would just do a copy of this into basically my home folder .fonts like this. And once that's copied, I just do fc-cache. And what this does is it goes through that cache directory, finds all those fonts, and loads them automatically.
Or user share fonts true type. There we go. I'm gonna put a font in here. Permission denied. Okay, so open as root. Done.
Sorry, what is this? K font view? Oh, install. Do you want to install the fonts for personal use system-wide? System-wide. Yes!
Print the Word doc. Okay, here's my Word document.
This should be easy for both of them.
That was probably the easiest and best printing experience I've pretty much ever had.
Let's go, Andy. The light's flashing. It's flashing. Come on, CLP. Yeah!
Nice.
That's very nice to hear.
Compress and send all the files on this drive.
Right click, compress.
Okay.
Compress. Compress.
Compress.
Here.
Here as .zip.
That's it?
Why is it .zip.uqjqfu?
Okay, that's...
Well, that brings up...
Wait, seriously?
That makes me think that it's
nothing.
Like a temporary folder.
.uqjq.
Watch the file size.
Oh, it's still compressing.
It was compressing still. It was still being compressed, and he's like, but the file is here.
Why would it put that there? Goodbye.
Because that's a temporary file name. It's kind of like if you download something, it says the name of the file .part.
It's a
Oh, come on, it was supposed to be super simple, this one.
Nope, it just is broken. Perfect. I think I just fell for the same thing that I said I wouldn't fall for again. Compress here as .zip. It was doing it down here, and I didn't...
Oh, come on. Okay. I mean, luckily, people don't usually have screens that large. I now understand all of the messages that were sent in the past few days in the visual design KDE chat.
Maybe I can weasel my way out of this a little.
Hello.
What do you mean by compress and send?
Could that been email it or something?
Well, I mean, there's a 3 gigabyte file in it, so emailing it's not really practical.
Then just don't include that video.
Oh, well, I mean, I already zipped the whole thing, including the video. Cause like, okay. I'm giving myself the points. I could have emailed this to someone. I think that's fine.
You're the boss, man. That's what James was thinking right there.
Linus could have easily gotten that done within less than a minute if that video was not included. And with that video included, I'm going to be shocked if Luke is able to do it in that period of time. And if he can, it's going to be like right at the edge, maybe 30-second difference or something, or maybe even less. I don't know. It's going to be very close.
Insert files using Drive. Linux challenge. Okay. One person view. Send. Got it.
Okay, close. I said 30 seconds. It was 28 seconds. Just like Linus, I'm going to give myself a point for that.
Now I have to make a shortcut. Done.
That looks like it's a shortcut. Yeah, it's a link. It's a shortcut. Nice.
Connect to a network share. This is actually crazy easy. I just click Linus and it will go to my share.
And that's it.
Like that.
Cool. It is now a network share.
Set up Discord app to open on startup. I think it might just do that by default. Hey, okay. Watch 4K content.
Pretty straightforward.
MP4. Where'd it go? Hello? Wait, it goes black and full screen?
Why does it do that? Is that happening with anybody else that uses the video player on KDE? I've never seen a video player do that.
I grabbed MPV Media Player, open the video, boom, full screen. Challenge number 12, watch HDR content.
You don't. You just don't. It just doesn't work. Maybe one day we'll have HDR on Linux, but today's not that day.
Other than digitally signing my PDF, I managed to complete all of my possible challenges. But that doesn't mean that the road to get here was as painless as what you just saw.
I've had a very frustrating issue where any amount of Windows movement, especially if I dare to have an even low performance game like FTL running, will be very laggy.
Luke is also using NVIDIA. This could very well be some weird NVIDIA driver problem.
Meanwhile, on Manjaro KDE, I've had a relatively smooth experience. Overall, if all I needed to do was run a web browser, do some basic word processing, I wouldn't have anything to complain about. Installing and managing applications, on the other hand, has made me wish that my Pop! OS experience hadn't been so discouraging. Manjaro has a graphical package manager called PAMAC that allows applications to be installed in a couple of clicks. But by default, it contains only some of the things I need. It can be unlocked to search for Flatpak, Snap, and AUR packages, which dramatically increases its usefulness. But if this Manjaro developer is to be believed, these non-official sources can result in downtime. And if they do, everything is working as intended.
These repos aren't managed by the Arch team. They're not managed by the Manjaro team.
The Manjaro devs test the packages that they build for the Manjaro repo to make sure that it works, but they don't test the AUR or Flatpaks or Snaps.
This is something managed by the community.
So they can't guarantee any of it is going to work.
I lost my link to the tweet, unfortunately, but I saw an interesting criticism of this series that basically accused me and Luke of intentionally smearing Linux and its developers because we were going to come into this with a basic Windows gamer perspective and try to do things the way that they do things.
That's like almost everyone's perspective, bro. Like, what are you talking about? That's almost everyone's experience with a computer. If you're a Linux user, you're the odd one out, man.
Well, newsflash, guys. That's most people.
Yeah, a lot of the people who have that kind of perspective don't want Linux to grow. They're gonna move on to BSD or maybe Haiku or something when people like you, Linus, come over to Linux because it'll get too popular and they won't be happy about it.
There are a plethora of reasons to transition your daily driver gaming rig over to Linux.
You could be sticking it to the man.
Or wanting to support the open source community.
Maybe you daily drive Linux for work already.
And all your games are natively supported anyway.
Or maybe you just want a new and challenging hobby.
But if what you want is a simple, painless gaming experience, then let this be a cautionary tale. It's funny because I assumed that this challenge would be more painful for me than it would be for Luke. I mean, after all, he has years of Linux experience while I came in with basically none. But here's the thing. I game mostly by myself as a way to relax or to hang out with my kids, and I am extremely flexible about what game I'll play. Luke, on the other hand, whose social circle is deeply immersed in gaming culture, has so much more on the line if he can't solve a problem.
Yeah, like I literally had a friend ask, "Hey dude, when are you gonna be back?" Obviously, I had never actually left, but I was a lot more difficult to include as a lot of competitive games that have anti-cheat just don't work. It took me so long to get a lot of games to a satisfactory level that by the time I was ready, everyone else was just done gaming for the night. And as a lot of my friends like to just try random games out for fun, this actually happened a lot.
Now, I do basically all of my PC gaming under Linux, and I could show you footage all day of various games running perfectly fine under Linux. But the reason why I can do that is because my tastes line up with the sort of stuff that typically works.
Somebody like me, I'm not really that much of a gamer.
I don't personally game almost at all.
I am a single player gamer.
I don't really care, actually, for many multiplayer games in general.
I don't really play much with like friends online.
I don't have a friend group that's like, oh, we're gonna go and play this specific game.
It's just not something that my use case depends on.
For me, it's not a loss to be a Linux gamer, but I can understand where, if Luke is playing games or if Linus is playing games and they want to play with their friends, well, they're probably not going to have the greatest experience.
If a game updates in a way where it breaks the Linux experience, you really have to hope somebody in the community can fix up a script or maybe fix up some dependency, or hope blindly that the developer chooses to make it easier for Linux, which they almost never will. If it works under Proton, congratulations, Linux guys, you get to play it. If it doesn't, don't hold your breath out for any developer jumping in to fix it.
Native Linux games are obviously going to be your best bet. Want to try one of my personal favorites, Crosscode? Click install, click play, and as simple as that. Valheim, meanwhile, ran amazingly and immediately, demonstrating how even smaller developers can make it work if they've got the will.
In addition to that, while not necessarily native, I played Legion TD2, Towerfall Ascension, Faster Than Light, Slay the Spire, Path of Exile, and Rust, and they all worked perfectly with zero actual effort. With all of that said, in spite of all of that work, we're honestly just not there yet. Anything that relies on an external service that updates independently of your computer can just unexpectedly break, and that's a lot of games these days.
Supreme Commander Forged Alliance was as simple to run as clicking install and enabling a couple of launch flags. Awesome. But if you want to play multiplayer, whoo boy, every guide I could find to get the Forged Alliance Forever launcher working on Linux was either hopelessly out of date or not applicable to my particular distro.
We actually live streamed trying to work through the Forged Alliance issues on Floatplane. There were more than a few comments in the chat criticizing us for choosing to play that particular game because it's old, it's just some crappy Java game, it's obscure, or because it's not fair to Linux.
Those first three reasons are reasons that it should work on Linux. It's obscure, it's Java, it's old. All of those are reasons that the game should work well. So I don't know what those comments are talking about.
But the bottom line is that none of that matters. What matters is that we like it and we wanted to play it, but instead of doing that, we played Terminal Command Simulator. And honestly, I've gone through enough of that over the last month that it has sucked a lot of the enjoyment out of using my computer. And it's really opened my eyes to why so many people choose to play on console instead of on PC. Like, this has got to be how a not super computer savvy user feels about updating a driver or fixing a firewall setting every time they just want to play a bloody game. To summarize the question that we set out to answer, is this the year of the Linux desktop? For gamers, the answer is no. I'm sorry. And the more niche your use case gets, maybe you're super into modding or the racing or flight sim scenes, or maybe you're a big VR lover, the more resounding
Definitely if you're a big VR lover.
No gets.
I'm in the same camp. But something has given me a lot of hope, and that's how much positivity we've seen from the Linux community in spite of our concerns. Because even if I'm not ready to convert my gaming rig just yet, it gives me hope that one day the meme will end and the year of the Linux desktop will come.
Now that the challenge is over, it's time to go back and watch the previous parts, because while the overall conclusion was...
Yeah, no, I'll pass on that.
All right, well...
That was it. That was actually kind of interesting.
As much as I love Linux, I do recognize that gaming on it is not great.
Maybe 2022 isn't the year of the Linux gaming desktop.
For right now, niche cases like video editing, playing the newest, latest, and greatest games, Linux is not number one in that regard at all.
If you are a programmer or a developer, Linux is a wonderful place to be. And of course, if you're somebody who just has general simple tasks like
web browsing,
word processing,
doing boring stuff
like that,
Linux is already there, okay?
What I enjoy about Linux is its flexibility,
the tinkering aspect,
its loads of documentation,
the customization aspect,
and how freeing it feels.
Or if you have a philosophy against Windows and how they work,
you definitely got to put the work in.
It might need a little tender love and care,
but if you give a shit at all,
you can actually get a pretty good computing experience out there.
It's so worth it.
So maybe if it's not ready today, come back every so often, maybe once a year, once every 6 months.
What we have is potential. We have room for growth.
Because only a few short years ago, none of this was possible.
All in all, I think this video was very good. I think this whole series was very good.
I think generally the experiment was good.
I think that what they've done here is great for Linux gaming.
Hopefully you learned something new.
Yeah, I hope that something nice came out of this.
There are some complaints that were a little like, come on. But overall, I agree.
We need to empathize a little bit more with people who aren't diehard Arch Linux users. You know, we just need to pull back a little bit on the superiority of what we think of Linux and try to acknowledge the flaws that it has, not only fix those flaws, but also help people who are discovering those flaws get through them.
There are a lot of us that care and want to help.
I hope that everyone else has managed to get something else out of this challenge as well, other than Linus is done.
I've seen a bunch of people in the comments on my videos, like paranoid people who are thinking, oh, they're just amping up drama to make it blah, 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 to get those precious Linux clicks. Let me tell you one thing and another, all right? If you're a Linux YouTuber, you don't make jack squat from ad revenue in the Linux community because most of us know how to use ad block, all right? Like, I'm not doing this for the money. I do this because I love what I do.